our speaker here. And Moss Rogers is not just a voice in mental health, she is a lighthouse in the storm. She turned her deepest loss into a mission, speaking life into conversations most people avoid. As a leading mental health and suicide prevention speaker, Moss Rogers combines lessons from the loss of her son to suicide with proven strategy to build a culture of wellness through self-care, healthy coping, and social connection. She spoke as a TEDx speaker, and she's an author of Diary of a Broken Mind and Emotionally Naked, a teacher's guide to preventing suicide. Today, she stands with us to bring hope where there's been silence and connections where there's been pain. And Moss, I'm so excited to meet you today because this is our first meeting. So
Yes,
thank you for being here.
I'm so excited to be here. And what a beautiful message you have, that music. Oh my gosh, I was sitting here going, I can't cry right now.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. We're ready for you.
So, welcome everyone to How to Raise Mentally Healthy Kids in the Digital Worlds. And I'm going to share with you some tips for teaching kids how to cope. This is going to be some emotional content today, so I want you to exercise when you need to step away. 988 is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You can call that number if you are worried about someone else. You can also call that if somebody tells you that they are really struggling, and you can reach out to 988 together. You can also text to 988 as well. You can reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741, and then warmline.org will give you just a warm line that is run by peers in your state. So that's not a crisis line. And this is my lovely son, Charles. He was the handsomest, funniest, most popular kid in school. And this is a picture of him on homecoming court in 2014. No, 2010, sorry. And he is walking with his favorite teacher, Miss Fretwell. I was actually escorting my older son, Richard, and he was also on homecoming court. And I think to a lot of parents that year, they looked down and saw that both my boys were on homecoming court. And I think they thought, man, that family has it made. She knows what she's doing. We did not, because it wasn't long after this picture was taken that my son's drug use started to escalate. And it started with robo-tripping, which is from that cough medicine with DM in it, alcohol, marijuana. And I was like, why is he using all these things? Is he trying to fit in? Is he trying to normalize his mental health experiences? And I didn't really know, but what I didn't know was that he was using drugs and alcohol, probably for those other reasons, but mainly to numb thoughts of suicide. So when we numb our feelings, they don't go away, but it does take away your ability to develop healthy coping strategies. And that really became his go-to strategy, unfortunately. So it wasn't too long that we were meeting with a counselor, and he said that what we should do, since we had utilized all local resources over the course of at least 2 years, that we kidnap our son out of his bed and take him to a wilderness program. Now, you don't do that because you caught your kid with a beer and a joint. You do that because you're a desperate parent and it was recommended to you and you can see no other option. You feel like, I need to do something. I will tell you that if I had to kidnap my kid out of his bed again and take him to this program, I probably would defer to family-based treatment first, but that wasn't offered at the time and it wasn't an option. This did basically introduce a new trauma in my child's life. And the amount of guilt I felt was absolutely awful, but it's like guilt versus death. That's what I felt like I was dealing with. This is where he was finally diagnosed with major depression and an anxiety disorder. From here, they would recommend that he go to therapeutic boarding school. And he would return home in 2014, having been outside our home some 22 months. He was pretty angry when he came back, but Charles was a really loving kid, and he couldn't be angry but for so long. What I didn't know at this point is that my son was not utilizing all the new coping skills and strategies he had learned while he was away. Instead, he was addicted to heroin, and I didn't even know it because I didn't know that you could snort heroin, and you can. And I would finally find out, and he would confess it, and he would go to detox, he would go to rehab, and he relapsed within 24 hours after getting out of rehab. So it was their policy to check him back into detox. They did that, and they called me, said he was all checked in. And the next call I got was that he had walked out with a friend. And for 2 weeks, we didn't know where he was. My husband and I were sitting in a restaurant one night, and we were worried, where is he? We haven't heard from him. And I'd been reaching out to him that day and had gotten no response. And then the police called. And in the back of a police car in the parking lot, they gave us the worst news of our lives. And they told us our son had been found dead that morning. I thought for sure he had died from overdose, but then they told me it was a suicide, and the method left no question. It was like this extra twist to the knife. And my first thought, how could I be such a crummy mother that my child would leave me this way? But it wasn't about me. I didn't understand why suicide. I didn't understand a lot about mental illness. And one day I would. And I made that pledge that I would. You guys, we were a normal family. We did normal family things. We baked cakes together. We played slip and slide. I coached basketball. We went on beach vacation. We had friends over. We had pizza parties. There really wasn't something I said or did that caused my son to suicide. And when I looked at old videos, I saw that my child grew up in a house of love. What I recognized is I was focusing on the 5% of parenting I did imperfectly, ignoring the 95% I did right. And I want to know from you all today, do you do that? Do you focus on that one mistake you've made and ignore all the good that you do? And I want you to think about that today. Thank you all for your sweet thoughts. We'll briefly talk about mental health. So, why are we seeing so many young people with mental health issues? And I could do 4 or 5 slides on this one. One is underdeveloped coping skills. And those underdeveloped coping skills are difficult to build in the digital age. One is less face-to-face time with their friends. So with less face time out in the cul-de-sac playing dodgeball, that's unsupervised freelance time, they're not learning how to negotiate when they have an issue. So I'd play dodgeball in my cul-de-sac, and I would go running home because I was mad about a call that was made. I had to go back and negotiate myself in that friend group, or I'd have a very lonely summer. And I didn't want that to happen. So we need more of that freelance and unsupervised free time. And that means maybe a kid learns to get on a city bus and go somewhere. So we're putting a lot of restriction in the real world and not that many restrictions. So there's also earlier and increased screen time and social media use. And they're treating those algorithms to really swoop down on your child when they're at their lowest, because that's when they make the most money. So this is what we usually think about when we are looking for a depressed child, right? We're looking for the sad kid. And if any poster about a depression event, this is probably what you're going to see. Here's what we often see: anger and irritability. That's also an expression of depression. Also, absenteeism, or somebody who's faded into background noise. We take that personally, like your sister doesn't show up for Thanksgiving. That's usually not because of you, but because of something she's going through. Or a kid who used to come to school pretty regularly, now is not. So that social isolation is definitely an issue. This is what I saw: a son who wore the mask of a clown to cover up his depression. He didn't want anybody to know. He liked being the happy guy. So, when are young people most vulnerable? So, these are two sort of events that push them more into darkness or spiraling, suicidal thoughts, drug use, whatever it is that they're using to manage their issues. Transitions and mini transitions. So the big ones are graduation, summer to school, middle school to high school to college to real life, or it could be if they go into the trades and then they go to real life. Then you've got your mini transitions: spring break. You have like holiday break. And then you have relationship disruption, and that could be grief and loss of a loved one, loss of a pet, loss of a sibling, loss of a friend. A relationship disruption could be a romantic breakup. It could be parents divorcing. So all those instances seem to exacerbate a kid who's already vulnerable. So I'm going to talk a little bit about strategies for building resilience and preventing crisis. As a parent and as a teacher, we need to move from the disciplinarian to wisdom guide, kind of like Kohila was talking about earlier, because that punitive parenting is not working on this generation of kids. And we need to kind of allow them to think through some of their issues, and we need to ask more questions. One of those is allowing more freedom in the real world. What happened is around the 80s, we started seeing milk cartons with missing children, and we started to get fearful of the outside world. But that's extremely rare, even though it does happen. But it happens every day online. The bullying. Basically, if they're online, the algorithm's targeting them when they're at their lowest. So I think having in your home and in your school the no phone zone and more boundaries in the digital one. And I don't think it's really monitoring their phone while that's part of it. It's really more having put it in the basket at dinner time. It doesn't go into the room at night. It doesn't come in the classroom, because if we want kids to learn, we need to keep the cell phones out of the room. So I went and I presented at a school recently, and the teacher came out and she goes, the difference when we got rid of the cell phone, she says, I come in, they're all talking to each other, and they weren't doing that before. And she says, I just sit down and listen to that, and I just bathe in the sound of them chattering to each other. And by the way, somebody sent me this. It's a picture of his child in Paris on an iPad. No, don't do that. Let them run around if they need to. So, two resources. One is the family media plan that will help you create those boundaries. And the TAPS toolkit is one to help you create that school policy. listen more and lecture less. I cannot emphasize how important this was. We need to allow them to feel heard without fixing. If there was one consistent theme that I recognized from kids, it would be I don't feel seen and I don't feel heard. They feel like they're being talked over. So I think really being quiet is important. So here's how I did it with my kids. I came home one day and I said, I'm never going to lecture again. And my sons laughed. They were like, oh, you'll do it forever. There's no way you'll stop. And I'm like, yes, I will stop. And you all are going to help me. You all are going to tell me when I start lecturing. And then I'm going to apologize and say, I'm sorry. I gave you unsolicited advice. 2 months. I have not lectured since, not once. What do I do instead? I ask questions and I modeled the use of healthy coping skills. One of those is like doing the deep breathing in front of them, showing that when we have a strong emotion, that we're coping with it. It's also the opposite of that. I'm out front and I get in a big argument with the neighbor. I come in and go, ooh, I shouldn't have done that. What do you think I should do? Listen to what they have to say. So ask more questions with curiosity, and this builds problem solving skills. So my son was moving out to California, and he says, we're going to take all our stuff. And I'm like, thinking how expensive that would be. Where are they going to put it? I said, none of that. I asked him one question. You said you were couch surfing when you moved to California, right when you got there. Where are you going to put the stuff? And he said, I don't know. And then you know what I did? Said not another thing. 2 weeks later, he calls me back and goes, Mom, we're selling or giving away all our stuff because I found out how much it was to haul it out there. And I also found out how much it was to store the stuff once we got there. And I just praised him and told him how smart he was to come up with a solution. And I said, I knew you'd come up with a good solution. If he had not, if that hadn't occurred to him and he decided to get a U-Haul, I would have had to let him find out the hard way, which is hard to do. Be vulnerable. You can't expect them to open up if you don't, but we don't want to overshare. So this picture is not the actual picture because I don't have his actual picture, but a professor reached out to me and said, I want to connect and be vulnerable with my students, but I don't have the language skills. I'm from Vietnam and I want to be able to connect with them, but I don't know how. So what we did is got pictures of him as he immigrated from Vietnam to the United States, and then a photographic story of how he became a professor. And it had a couple lines under each one. All of a sudden, his absentee rates went way down and he started getting more students coming to class. They knew and they felt his vulnerability and they understood his PhD had come with a whole lot of work, grit, and determination. And they started telling their own stories too. I love this one. So ask for their support. A friend of mine, Jen, was going back to work and she was going in a new position and she says, gosh, I feel such anxiety. I said, ask your kids for help. And she goes, they're 8 and 10 years old. How are they going to help? And I said, well, ask them for a hug. Tell them you're really anxious. So they did that, but they went one step further. And every single day for 2 weeks, they snuck a note in her lunch. And it said, hi, Mom, it's me again with another note. How was your second day? And she said, as soon as I saw that, I just melted. So she comes home and she tells them what those notes meant. And that kind of gave them their power back. That also gave them that sense of purpose. Wow, I really do make a difference. Understand their fears. Let's say you've made a psychiatrist appointment and the day of, and it's taken you 6 months to get it and a lot of paperwork, they say they're not going. Don't put your foot down. Instead, say, why don't you want to go? And listen, understand their fears. So maybe they say, I'm afraid they'll make me take a medication that'll make me a zombie and take away my personality. As a parent, you say, huh, I hadn't thought of that. That is a worry. Let's write that down as a question to ask. In fact, let's write down all of our questions. Can you ask the psychiatrist when we're in there? And how about let's go and see what she says? We can't force you into some kind of compliance when you're not invested. So again, when we understand their fears and they felt heard, they're willing to participate. Allow them to fail. Our best lessons are learned from failure, and success is a bunch of lessons we've learned from failures put all together. So when we're going upstream, like at a school community, want to build connection and belonging, that is number one. Showing a funny video to your whole class is building connection and belonging because you're laughing together. Build coping and critical thinking skills. And you can do this without changing your curriculum, bringing in some big, huge program. And then promote help seeking as a sign of strength. And you can do that by just putting like crisis text line posters on your walls. So one of the things I like to do is I show this 10-second video. And it says, if you are trying to make a decision while your mind's in this tsunami of emotions, it's like one of these glitter jars, it's all swirling around. You have to wait till your mind settles before you can make an informed decision. Learning that pause is the absolute foundation of all emotional regulation skills. They have to learn to do that before they can do mindfulness. You can't do mindfulness if you can't take a pause, take a deep breath, and change wherever your emotional energy is right now. One teacher did this mental health check-in. She is a chemistry AP teacher, and she started doing this, and she said during COVID, it was absolutely critical. But she started doing it before then, and she continues to do it. What happens right at first is they'll just say what their scale is, worst to best. And then she says, after about 3 weeks, they'll say, I think I'm going to say a 1 because my dad just got a cancer diagnosis and we're all really worried. Once they kind of said things like this, different classmates would connect with one another and share their own experiences of having been through something similar. This coping card has been a huge hit. And I do this with NC State first-year students for the last 3 years. And a coping card is just reasons for living, coping strategies, people to reach out to, because we need a plan when life goes upside down, because it's never going to go perfect someone's whole life, right? We're all going to hit a crisis point. Everyone should have a coping card. So when I have the first-year students do it, the parents are online, I make them do it. And then I tell them they have to send their coping card to their student to prove that they did it. 2 books I would recommend. One is Careless People. That'll tell you how they are focusing on your children in the digital world. The other is Anxious Generation, that talks a lot about the phones and the screen time, but also why we're seeing more mental health issues with kids. I would love for you all to write down one thing you learned today in the chat. This kind of is my own self-care step, because after telling my story, I can feel this kind of crash, and these kind of fill me back up. So I'd really appreciate if you could just put one thing you learned today. And in memory of my sweet boy, I think is funny and as talented as my son was, his greatest gift was letting other people know that they matter. And I want you all to know, from me to you, a big hug. Thank you for being here today. It looks like a lot of you have read Anxious Generation. It is a really good read. It gives you a lot of reasons why kids are where they are. And it's interesting how complicated the boys are and how that started back in the 70s. I literally took 12 pages of notes on that book. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. And thank you to Charles for allowing this to come to us and to reach all the families they need to hear. What I loved about what you shared today is when you said that we think depression looks like this. So you showed us different ways that it can look like. I also tried to commit suicide at the age of 12 and I survived.
Wow.
So I'm living my purpose right now. This is the purpose I was brought back. But I wasn't looking like anything like that either. There's those people who are silent and
Yes.
like we look fine. I dress fine. I don't speak. I just hold it all together and look normal.
A lot of people do. So we know that 80% of those who die by suicide, 75 to 80%, will let their intention known to be some way. It might be a picture, it might be in a paper they write, but that leaves 20% who really have no real sign. So I think that's why it's really important to have this conversation. The slide with the resources, which one?
We have a resource section where we're giving them. Oh no, you had a slide with resources. Can you share that again? That's what they're asking.
Let me see.
I think it was one more. Not that one. Oh, there.
Not
Is
that
that it?
one.
Is that it? No.
I have one. Oh, is it the QR code?
I think you said you can use this or that, and there was two options. I think if you go back a little more, interesting.
I, yeah,
No,
sorry, you
early
guys.
on. Somebody says early on, so maybe at the beginning. But do you have a resource list that you can share with me? I can put it in the chat later. Or is it
Sure, yeah.
okay, awesome. Okay, we'll get it for you guys. So we were talking about this looking different, depression looking different. What's one thing you can share with parents who might be ignoring, like not because they want to, but just because we're so busy, right? Parents are busy.
Right.
We're so busy.
So sometimes it's hard to tell between like teen angst and what might be a warning sign. So it's totally normal for a kid to withdraw from parents to spend more time with friends. But if they are isolating from family and friends, that's a red flag. Another red flag is, let's say, they're wanting more privacy. Totally normal for that age. But if they're becoming more secretive, that's a warning sign. My son did that. All of a sudden, he didn't want to give me his passwords. All of a sudden, he's closing his door more and not answering his phone more. It is not unusual for them to go from like, I love to draw. Now I'm passionate about cross country training. To go from one pursuit to another as they get older. Let's say they just ditch everything. That's a warning sign. Like they played piano their whole life. They decide one day, I don't want to play piano anymore. And it's been their passion, not yours. But they don't replace that. That's a warning sign. And those are things we need to pay attention to. Also, if they say, I'm so ugly, nobody likes me, I'm such a burden, I can't do this anymore, I feel worthless. So all those should trigger another conversation of tell me why you feel that way, and then just being quiet and not saying anything at all.
Yes.
And if they're saying enough things that worry you, then you need to say, are you thinking of suicide? And they may say yes. And you may feel panic. Take a deep breath and just say, tell me more about how you feel. And while they're doing that, you can bring your emotions in check because you cannot panic in front of them. That's what they're worried about.
So I've heard it and I believe it too. So if somebody had asked me myself, I've been through it. I don't know if I would have come out plain and said yes to anyone because it was very secret that I was planning. It was a mastermind between me and me. So I couldn't bring anyone else into that consultation. But what I would have thought is that somebody cared. It's not said they're noticing. In my mastermind, I would have had a point to discuss about. Oh, they're noticing. How did they know about this? So I must be giving off something.
Right.
So that noticing would have caught me to mastermind differently than what I was masterminding before
Right.
that conversation.
Sometimes they may hesitate before they answer. And then you say, I'm going to take that hesitation as a yes. Would I be correct in that assumption? And sometimes you have to ask again. If you were asking a really young child, they don't understand what the word suicide means. So they'll run out in front of a car. There was a child who's on the spectrum who did that last year, and the teacher had to go get the child and bring him back to safety. So she risked her own life. And she's, what do I ask this kid? And I said, ask him, was he thinking of making himself dead? Because he didn't understand what suicide meant. And he said, yes, I wanted to make myself dead. And they were able to take the appropriate actions from them, because even though he was 10 years old, he was still struggling with thoughts of suicide as someone on the spectrum in elementary school.
So there are parents who also fear to ask that question because then
Right.
they fear that am I putting thoughts into my
But
child's.
I might plant the idea in their
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
You are not. Now, if you were to talk a lot about method, that's dangerous for this age group. We're talking about guns and hangings. We want to avoid all that. But asking them if they are thinking of suicide does not plant the idea in their head. What it does is says, I'm willing to have this conversation. I'm willing to say this really difficult word. And if you ever are suffering, then what you've done is you've planted a seed in their head. If I am thinking this way, I can talk to this person or this parent.
Yeah, it opens up. Otherwise, I feel like I'm alone. So it opens up the
Right.
pathway to conversation.
And they may say no and just say, thanks for your honesty. I just feel like I have to ask that question. And I hope you're okay with me asking it. And you can ask me that question too.
Yes. And as you're speaking to these schools, this bullying, right? It doesn't end at school, it continues online, right?
Right.
I was out yesterday eating, and two families came with five, six kids, and one child was walking to the dinner table at the restaurant with an iPad glued like this, like he's walking, playing or looking something, and he sat down, and all the other boys came along, and there was no conversations whatsoever other than what do you want to eat, what do you want to drink. But the three of them are like glued to it. We're sitting in the sand on the beach. Like there's so much going on. They're not interacting with their environment at all. And one of them came completely in, like this into the pad. So what are we going to tell the generation of parents right now? I think they're doing it without knowing. It's not a known thing that they're ignoring them, but we have to really help them understand they're getting trained. That is their training ground. They're getting trained. This is how I eat with a screen in front of me. This is how I live. And then they're not absorbing any of the activities that are happening in the real world.
That's why I offered one of the resources as a family media plan. At the table, everything goes in a basket. We are outside at the beach. We are not on our iPads. Now, I do read at the beach, so it may be that they're allowed to have a Kindle and read a book or take a paperback book. Or maybe you model that, all right, I'm not going to take my Kindle to the beach. I'll take an actual paperback book. But I like to play with kids. I'm an older individual, but boy, I was out there playing stomp rockets, pickleball, all sorts of games with my young nieces, nephews, the great and grand nieces and nephews now. I'm not sitting there looking at my phone. So I'm modeling that behavior. because they're going to see what we're doing too. And if we're on our phone and our iPads all the time, they will be too.
Yes. And people sometimes I hear say that's our new world. It's not the new world. The new world has technology, but it's used when it needs to be used. It's not doesn't.
Exactly.
You can't go shower with it.
So well
It
said.
has to be
Right.
put down. You can't take it into the water and I have to watch my thing. There's times you got to leave it. And that's how you set boundaries with our kids. So I was so sad because those three boys were under 9, like little boys. You know, when we got to a beach and there's sand under you, like, I just want to build. I just want to run. I just want to roll in it. I
Oh,
was,
catch crabs.
or something, but nothing.
What
And
about that young lady in Paris? I
oh,
mean,
yeah.
they're in Paris and she's on her iPad with earphones on, blocking out all the din and the noise. I'm like, oh, what a lost opportunity that was.
So would we then in the future label that as some social anxiety syndrome? Because if I hear normal people, I might not know what to do with that information.
And I'm not talking about like kids on the spectrum.
No, I'm
That,
saying
yeah,
newly diagnosed,
normal.
normal
Right.
people. Yeah, but a new
Normal.
disease.
I'm just hearing, I like to go out after dinner and I hear the dogs barking, but what I like is the crickets. I like to hear the crickets this time of year in our area.
Yes.
And all those sounds are important and we can't always be blocking them out. And I'm not saying never be on your phone or never be on a computer. I'm just saying we need to create some boundaries. We need to recognize them for ourselves because then we're modeling it for the young people.
Yep. Yep. I've always said if we don't let strangers, if they come knocking on our front door, we don't open and say, yeah, my kid is upstairs. You can go visit them and close the door,
Right.
by the way, and go into the washroom as also fine as well. Bye bye. Thanks. We don't do that. But
No.
phone, we let our children with it in the room with hundreds and thousands of strangers visiting them, including into their bathroom, because if they take the phone, they go with them. And then
Right.
we wonder, what's going on? Why are you depressed? Why are you doing this? Well, they have hundreds of other influencers inside
Right.
your bedroom, which you would never do by opening your front door and saying, go ahead, go stay with my son or daughter up there. So we as parents, like my son is 18, we had a strict rule that the phones have boundaries. It's a tool you use and I own it, you don't own
Own it. You pay that bill.
it. Yeah.
And they should be 12 or older. And I would wait on the smartphone as
Yeah.
long as I possibly could, because those are the keys to the kingdom that they're just not ready for.
No.
Just think about at what age do you want your kids to see some really hardcore porn?
Oh, I know. It's crazy what they can access. It's that's also something it puzzles me. Like when we were growing up, when you were growing up, there were age limits to what you can watch and what time things would show up on big screens or
Mhm.
TVs or radios. Now there is nothing. No filter. They're
No
24/7
filter.
available. So when did our society move over to 6-year-old can decide if this is a good material or not a good material to watch?
Right.
Like, how would they know? Otherwise, we should just give birth and send them off into
Right.
the world and go, okay, go survive, baby. We don't. There's a reason why.
You you would be shocked at what they access. I had some spyware on my son, and the internet would cut off at 9 p.m. for all of us. It would cut off. And that was back before you could really do a lot on a phone and get cell phone coverage. But
Yes.
help create those boundaries. And my kids were younger. They didn't get phones until high school. They didn't get smartphones until much later, but they weren't available. So I didn't have that battle. And I feel for the parents because it's really hard. So find other people who believe the same way
Yes.
so that you have a partner, because it's really hard to be out there alone, being the only one. There are other parents that feel this way.
Yeah, you have to find that's your tribe, and always be that protection. Our kids cannot protect themselves. Whatever looks easy, whatever is easy to consume, they're going to be drawn into it. And what also you said that was very important in your presentation, the algorithm. When you're
Right.
depressed, it shows you more depression things and things that will, like, isn't that so sad?
It is so sad. And if you were to go out to Silicon Valley, they do not let their kids have phones until they are like well over 18. They are so strict because they know what's going on. They're
Yes.
part of it.
Yes. If you're feeding that to them, why we like the depression, more people, that's what's happening. Your and my are different. Even my husband and I, my are different. We live together. It's not the same. It's about what you're
Yeah.
looking, what you're searching. Where did you stop for 2 seconds? Then you get that more fed into your scroll. So what is your child watching? So that's an important responsibility of a parent. Because
It's really hard to monitor that. It's easier to just have digital rules where the phone goes here. There are phones like the Bark phones, for example, and then watches that you can text them if you need to pick them up from a dental appointment. So those are stopgaps that you can do before they get the phones. And that's a whole nother presentation, but it does get
exactly.
complicated.
And also, one of the things you said today, and which I practice as well, is having conversation. Don't implement a rule and say, that's my rule. Like when I told my son that I own that phone, he understood why I own the phone. I didn't just say, I own the phone. It's because I'm paying. That wasn't the reason I gave. I said more things to him to explain to him the rule was being placed for certain reasons, and he understood, and he actually now brings it to me because he said, this is taking my attention away, I'm too distracted, and he brings it
Yeah.
to me. And he's 18, and he's done it even last week when he was here. He gave it to me. My mom, Henny, hold on, I never asked him, but because of the habit that he built, he knew when he has to get rid of that in order for him to get some. And then now we talked about he's going to university. I talked about him. What about over there? I'm not there to bring it to me. So who will
Yeah.
you give it to? So he's actually said, I'm going to dedicate an area where I'm going to put it away in times that I can't control myself because I'm scrolling, and I delete some stuff off of it. He took Instagram off of it and things like that. So he did that not because I forced or I looked in his phone. What do you have? I've never looked in his phone or asked for his word or anything like that. I just set it up with lots of reason explanation why we're doing this. So that's not rule, that's actually a conversation when you do.
Yeah. And I like what Catherine says about placing limits. It's not a punishment. So I think that's really good.
Is there any question for Anne Moose? Anybody else have anything else to add? I don't think so. They loved your presentation. You can see it in the comments. They loved your resources. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing about your son. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.